Today my topic is Quine-Kripke-Plantinga on essence. It's all about essence. We know there are lots of philosophers who worked on essence in Western philosophy as well as in India. Under essentialists we get Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Saul Kripke, Plantinga, Hilary Putnam, David Huggins and many more. Under anti-essentialists we get W.V.O. Quine, Maurice Lake, Hans Reichenbach, Rudolf Carnap, and Agier and many more. Here I shall confine myself to purely analytic philosophy, and I shall discuss mainly three major analytic philosophers from 20th century like Willard van Orman Quine, Saul Kripke and Alvin Plantinga. As a historical background, I shall also discuss the views of Aristotle for better understanding of essence. Essence can be treated from two aspects. One is ontological argument, another one is semantical. Under ontological, I will discuss Aristotle and Quine, and under semantical aspect, I will discuss Kripke and Plantinga. So I shall try to critically appreciate both the sides of essentialism, metaphysical as well as semantical. Now, what are the problems? First of all, what is essence? How did Aristotle deal with essence in categories as well as in metaphysics? What is the relationship between de facto and de re necessity regarding essence? How did Quine attack essentialism by refuting quantified modal logic, that is QML? And last but not least, how Kripke and Plantinga tried to revive essentialism by introducing the concept of transversal identity, possible world, and rigid and non-rigid designators. So what is essence and what are the essential properties? The essence of a thing is nothing but the totality of those characteristics which are its essential properties. So what are the essential properties? A property is essential to an object if the object cannot lack the property and still be the object what it is. In search of an essence, first you have to start with an object, reducing into its constituting parts. Ultimately, we reach at a certain point that cannot be further analyzed, is called essence. Say the word man. What is the essential property of man? How do you know man 1, man 2, man 3, all are man, nothing else? Is there any common characteristics hidden in them? Suppose M1, M2, M3 all are a logician. So may I say that logician is the essence of being a man? No. The same man can exist without being a logician, but the same logician cannot exist without being the same man. Therefore, man is the basic subject naturally prior to the logician. So, being a logician is not essential to being a man. Now, we will search out, find out what is the essential property of man according to Aristotle. So, first, Aristotelian essence. The main strength of essentialism is derived from Aristotle. Aristotle in his categories distinguishes between primary and secondary substances. An individual substance such as Socrates is an example of primary substance and human being is an example of secondary substance. Now Aristotle defined man as a rational animal. Here in the definition rational animal, rationality is the differential which distinguishes man from the other classes, other like horse, cat, dog, which also falls under the same genus, that is animal. So the combination of genus and differential signifies a particular species, that is man. It was Aristotelian view. Now we can say Socrates as a man is essentially or necessarily rational animal. So here we get the modal concept of necessity. Now, this necessity and possibility can be treated again from two aspects. One is de facto, another one is de re. When a modal operator prefixes the whole statement, it is called the de facto modality. And when a modal operator quantifies only the predicate part, it is called the Dede modality. And Dede interpretation demands essentialism. If we say Socrates as a man is essentially or necessarily rational, it will be a Dede modality or Dede concept. Now we'll see how Quine attacked Dedecto and Dede both, and he refuted essentialism. W. Quine, in his famous writing Pursuit of Truth, said, words owe their meaning to their role in the sentences rather than having meaning independently. The fundamental relation between language and the world is not a referential relation, it is rather a relation between sentences, complete utterances, and sensory stimulations. W. Quine argued against essences by saying that what makes something necessary is not some feature of the object concerned, but rather some feature of the way we describe it. This is the main difference between Quine and Aristotle. Here Quine said meaning is what essence becomes when it is divorced from the object of reference and wedded to the word, the meaning. So what are the arguments against quantified modal logic, that is QML? Quine's principal argument against QML is that modal sentences involving the expression possibility and necessity as symbolized in QML induce referential opacity. So if we use Dedecto modal operator, we will get referential opacity. So what is referential opacity? If in a true statement we replace a singular referring expression by one of its equivalent and the truth value of the statement as a whole remain unaffected, then it is called subverted. Otherwise it induces referential opacity. For example, if I say necessarily 9 is greater than 7, and if we replace 9 by the number of planets, we get necessarily the number of planets is greater than 7, but it is completely a false statement. Thus, Quine rules out the possibility of QML, quantified modal logic. Now let us turn to the other horn of the dilemma, that is Dede modality. W. Quine has cast doubt on the notion of Dede modality. For Quine, mathematicians may conceivably said to be necessarily rational and not necessarily two-legged, and cyclists necessarily two-legged and not necessarily rational. Suppose a man who is both mathematician and cyclist. It's a famous example of W. Quine. In that case, as a mathematician, we can say X is necessarily rational but not necessarily two-legged. And as a cyclist, we can say X is necessarily two-legged but not necessarily rational. Now, if we conjunct and commute these, we will get two contradictory statements. X is necessarily rational but not necessarily rational. X is necessarily two-legged and not necessarily two-legged. Thus, he attacked Dede modality, and we have already seen Dede modality demands essentialism. Thus, he refuted the possibility of essentialism. Next, we will see how Quine-Kripke and Plantinga tried to revive essentialism by introducing the concept of transual identity. Their main point was that in every possible world, every cyclist in that world is bipedal, but there may have some other possible world where cyclist is not necessarily bipedal. This is the main distinction between Quine and Kripke and Plantinga, of course. Once we draw this distinction, we can see that Quine's argument is invalid. Now, Kripkean view of proper name may be tagged as pro-Millian and anti-Fregean. So, how it is pro-Millian we will see. In this regard, Kripke aligns himself with J.S. Mill, who long before Kripke declared that proper names are non-connotative. For John Stuart Mill, proper names are non-connotative, whereas definite descriptions are connotative. A non-connotative term, Mill says, is one which signifies a subject only or an attribute only. A connotative term is one which denotes a subject and implies an attribute. A proper name, Mill says, is an unmeaning mark. Now, from Kripke's denial of Frege's semantic of language, it is quite clear that, according to him, this is not correct to say that the name connects to the different in virtue of certain conceptual association. For Kripke, it does not require any cognitive fix to get hooked into the reality. So, names admitted to be rigid designated. Now, what are the rigid and non-rigid designators? The expression rigid designator and non-rigid designator are very much technical as introduced by Kripke and sufficient to combat Frege-Russell model of semantics. What are rigid designator? A rigid designator refers to the same individual in every possible world. Suppose the square root of 64. It will designate 8 not only in actual world but in all possible world. But what is non-rigid? The definite descriptions. The man who won the presidential election in 2016 under different circumstances, someone else would have been the president. So it is non-rigid. This is the difference between rigid and non-rigid designator. The problem, according to Kripke, is that how could possibly identify Socrates in this world, and how could we pick him out? How could we possibly tell which of the many things contained in W is Socrates? So, what are the solution of Kripke? In naming and necessity, Kripke admits two types of properties. One is origin of the object, another one is the constitution of the object. What is the origin of the object? Suppose this table is made of wood. Then he will say this table originated from wood. This is the origin. And what is the constitution for Kripke? Suppose X was born to a couple, Mr. Y and Mrs. Z. That the gametes from which the X sprang out was his essence. This is Kripke holds that a proper name must be a rigid designator. What is the argument behind that? The argument is that in case counterfactual conceiving is possible, means the transversal identity is possible, then the proper names must designate rigid designator. How? If D-Day modality is meaningful, then counterfactual conceiving is possible. If counterfactual conceiving is possible, proper names must be rigid designated. So from here, by hypothesis, we can hypothetical syllogism, we can draw the conclusion: if D-Day modality is meaningful, proper names are rigid designators. So here we get Kripke's arguments in favor of essentialism. Now I shall discuss Plantinga on essence. Alvin Plantinga, in his The Nature of Necessity, talked about the difference between proper names and definite descriptions. According to Alvin Plantinga, proper names express essences, whereas definite descriptions do not. Some of the properties expressed by proper name are uniquely instantiated essential properties. This is the difference between Kripke and Plantinga. Here Plantinga admitted the qualitative essence. For Plantinga, proper names are not bare particular, they do indeed express properties. This is the difference. Both Kripke and Plantinga admitted essence, but Kripke admitted only rigid designators, but Plantinga admitted some qualities, some properties. That's the same Socrates will designate that man with some qualities. What are the qualities that we will see? So according to Plantinga, an essence is an essential property uniquely possessed by the individual that has it. If Socrates is an essence possessed by Socrates, then in every possible world in which it is instantiated by that individual Socrates, no other. This is the main point in behalf of essence. Robert Adam, in his Primitive Thisness and Primitive Identity, mentioned that there are three types of essences in Plantinga's sense. First, the most important thisness, primitive thisness. It is the property of being a particular individual or being identical with that individual. It is not the property we all share. My thisness is the property of being me, your thisness is the property of being you. Next, second is the qualitative essence. This is the difference between Kripke and Plantinga. A qualitative essence is a purely qualitative property that is possessed by a particular object, not by any other individual. Now, even if we do not have any quality, then how can we identify, how can I pick out Socrates from other man? In that case, Plantinga said, we can have alpha relational property. By the relation, the relative term, like an essence that has a form bearing R to A1, A2, A3, where A1, A2, A3 are certain individuals that exist in alpha. By that relational property also we can identify Socrates as Socrates. So there are three types of essences Plantinga admitted. One is primitive thisness, other one is qualitative thisness. By qualitative we can identify some man as a man, Socrates as Socrates. Another one is, third one is alpha relational property. By relation also, by relations also we can identify, pick out Socrates as Socrates. Here we shall see Plantinga is entertaining the possibility of non-qualitative thisness. And thisness is intended to be a synonymous translation of traditional haxity. The term haxity, which was invented by Duns Scotus, haxatism is a doctrine that holds that individual can exist in more than one possible world, and the same man can exhibit extreme dissimilarities from world to world, but that distinct individual can be very similar. So haxity can be defined as the essence of a thing. Plantinga goes on to explain the individual essence in terms of modality. The essence of Plato is unique to him insofar as there is no possible world in which there exists something distinct from him that has it. One of these individual essences is the property of being identical with Plato. If one gives a name to this quality, then the name would pick out this singular and incommunicable quality. If we fabricate the name Platonity to stand for the incommunicable property of Plato, it would stand for the unique property of Plato, no one else. So, I shall conclude with the difference between individual essence and general essence. An individual essence is unique to just one thing, while a general essence is shareable, repeatable and communicable, repetitive properties that is common to many objects. In categories, Aristotle talked about primary substances, that I have started with primary substances as a basic subject. But in metaphysics, Aristotle speaks of individual substances in terms of form and matter. Here he holds that not the individual substance, but its form is the primary substance. Therefore, his essence is general essence or kind-centric essence. Whereas for Quine there is no essence, neither generic nor individual. And for Kripke, not all the terms can capture essences, but some terms, like proper names, do have essences. In that sense, Kripke admits individual essence. But Kripke admitted the natural kind terms also. Like water, gold, etc. have essences. Once we discovered that water is H2O, that Putnam also said long back, in every possible world that will designate H2O only. So these natural kind terms are also have essence. Plantinga counts the individual nature of the object as falling within their essential properties. For Plantinga, any definite description can be turned into a world index predicate. This is the difference between Kripke and Plantinga I have already described. for Plantinga, suppose being identical with Tolstoy is not only the essence of Tolstoy, there are other essences of Tolstoy which he calls world index properties. While any unique property of Tolstoy, say being the author of War and Peace, being born at a particular place and time, are all accidental to Tolstoy. Tolstoy's having these properties in the actual world alpha is essential to him. This was the difference between Kripke, Plantinga and Quine. Thank you.
Now time for questions. Thomas.
Thanks, Vicky. That was really interesting. That was very. One thing you didn't mention about in terms of, you're quite right that Quine has this commitment to extensional logic, and that's doesn't like opaque context. But another of his reasons, and this goes into another reason people have been suspicious of modality and essence generally, going back to Quine, is the epistemology of it, right? How are we supposed to figure out this stuff, right? And I take it part of Quine's, attack on the analytic synthetic divide is that there's just no such thing as conceptual truths, right? There's no such thing as conceptual analysis, right? And so, how is it that we get at the idea that water has this, in every possible world it's H2O, whereas, I don't know, whatever, this is Fodor's example, that Coca-Cola, right, doesn't have the same essence in every possible world. How do we know that? Well, it seems it's just supposed to be conceptual. It's supposed to be just a conceptual issue, right? So if you're Quine, there are no conceptual truths, right? So, I just wondered if you had any thoughts on that kind of...
I know here I missed out that epistemic part of that David Wiggins also talked about these essences, the epistemic part of essences, because here I just tried to, because it is the main theme of the conference was mode of thinking versus speaking. That's why I just tried to concentrate on the ontological and semantical, mainly the semantical part of this. There are epistemological views, I know, but I didn't confine myself on that part. Because there are so many philosophers, like David Wiggins, the main, who talked about the epistemic side of the essence. I missed out here. Right. That's the reason why I didn't discuss this.
Well, in your talk you focused primarily on the individual essences, but you mentioned natural kind terms. And what's your personal opinion about these two forms of essentialism? Which essentialism is more deep and fundamental, and which is so kind of derivative?
For me, the individual essence will be the more fundamental, because even if we define man as a rational animal, there are other mans, like Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. They are also under the same species. We should differentiate them from Socrates to Plato to Aristotle. There should be some individual essence by which we can separate them, like Socrates, or for Aristotle it should be some intrinsic property should be there by which we can differentiate the others them from the other species. I think individual essence should be the more fundamental, more basic in that sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe I can have a question, because you speak about essences, and what about being? Because if we are speaking, for example, about individual beings and about these heisetas, it's also about to be this thing. So it's not only to have some properties, not to be in existence, and I suppose in Don Scott it's also some kind of this reason it was present.
Right. As far as I understand, you are talking about the existence before, whether essence is prior or existence is prior. I don't want to get into this problem right now, because I'm not much aware about it. But there is some, conversation on that, discussions on that essence is the prior. First we get the essence, then only we can pick out, with this essence we can pick out an object and we can say this exists. Suppose a bottle exists. First we have to know what is bottle, what is the definition of bottle, then only we can apply it on that particular object. So for me, essence first comes essence and then only the existence.
Okay, thank you very much.